What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing campers' paranormal encounters. Most of us have been camping at least once in our lifetimes, and even if you're someone like me who has never been camping in your entire life, you at the very least, more than likely, know what it is enough to picture camping in your head. I know when I think of camping, I think immediately of serenity and of being one with nature and Mother Earth. I picture myself lying there in my tent and looking up at a sky full of stars and listening to the sounds of the nighttime critters as they lull me to sleep. Or sitting around a campfire with friends and family, telling scary stories and making s'mores. My point is, camping is pretty common and many people enjoy doing it. However, in this community, we know all too well that camping is not exactly what it's made out to be a lot of the time, because it's so easy for something to go terribly wrong from one moment to the next. However, I've brought you encounters from truckers, police officers, men and women who work in hospitals, etc., and the list goes on. But I realized the other day that I never went through encounters with you that came from people who were camping in the woods specifically. So we've done encounters in the woods and things like that, but I feel like this is more just camping, right? I think I've said everything there is to say, and I really hope you're as excited as I am to get into this. So without further delay, let's jump right in. On the site Your Ghost Story, I came across a commenter named Delta412, and what he had to say blew my mind. Delta said that his bizarre and terrifying encounter happened when he was out camping with his family in Colorado when he was just a kid. At first, everything was perfectly normal and everyone was having a lot of fun. Until one night, after they had all gathered around the fire to spend some time together as a family. Once they were ready to call it quits for the night, they all got into their RV camper, which was old and somewhat beaten down. As everyone else in his family fell asleep, Delta said he was overcome with fear and felt as though something just wasn't quite right. It got to the point where he couldn't sleep at all, and the fear was building, but he just couldn't understand where it was coming from or what was causing it. Eventually, he went to go and sleep with his mom, looking for comfort from his own emotions that obviously made no sense to him at the time. He said, in his own words, quote, "I remember I was still so small, my mom let me share the bed with her. I tried to get some sleep, but as the night went on, I still couldn't sleep, and then something happened so terrifying, I still remember it vividly to this day." The camper started to shake and bang as something outside started to pound against the RV. My mom was the first to wake up and grasp me tight as she got real scared. I'm sure at first she thought it was a bear or something, but then whatever it was hopped onto the top of the rooftop and started to try and bust its way in using the emergency exit on top of the camper. I remember my mom got so scared she quickly tried to wake my brother Pat and my dad, but they seemed to be long passed out. Not even the constant banging would wake them. My brother Pat woke up for a second and asked what was going on, but then seemingly passed out again. I remember my mom was near to crying. She was so scared for her family and for herself, I'm sure. My mom's a very religious person, so she got out a prayer book and started praying. And what was I doing? I was sitting there calm in my mom's arm as whatever it was that was out there was wrecking the hell out of that camper. I wanted to look out the curtains to see what it was, but my mom wouldn't let me, although I did see a shadow. It looked like a dinosaur on two legs, something I'm sure nobody's ever seen before. As my mom began to pray more and more, it seemed to anger the creature. It went crazy outside. Now I wonder what kind of creature could keep up the strength to seemingly go on for hours until daylight, just pounding away at our camper like that. Throughout the night, my mom began to fear for my dad's life as he began to seemingly stop breathing, and she would wake him every few minutes for a mere second to make sure he was still breathing, end quote. This encounter is crazy, and there's a lot to unpack. At first, I thought for sure that this family just happened to accidentally trespass upon an angry Bigfoot's territory, but then I read more and understood that they were under attack by something much more evil and much more determined. The fact that his father and brother didn't wake up right away, and that when the brother did wake up and saw his mother in terror and crying the way she was, he was able to just fall right back asleep, that said it all to me. It spoke volumes. We see this in a lot of encounters with evil entities and even sometimes with extraterrestrial beings, and in fact, it's one of the main components of black-eyed kid encounters as well, and the ones that happen with more than one person in the home at the time of the visit. It's like there's one of two people who are the focus, and anyone else who's there with them is put into some sort of very deep sleep or trance, and they cannot easily be woken from it. I believe this family came across a forest demon, and say that as generally as I can because I know that there are many different types of so-called forest demons. The creature, whatever it was intelligent and persistent. It knew to get on top of the RV and to try to break in through the emergency exit, but then it didn't seem to occur to it that it could have easily broken the windows in order to gain entry. Also, the shadow Delta said he saw, the one that looked like a giant dinosaur, got me thinking that he must have seen a distorted version of whatever was out there. The fact, too, that the praying angered the entity but didn't deter it at all also leads me to believe that whatever it was they were faced with out there, it wasn't anything good. It was possibly demonic and definitely would have killed them, possibly for their souls, but really, who knows? This story isn't even over yet, though, and Delta said that his mother was convinced it was something demonic and that it was trying to possess them. However, there were and still are no clear answers for what happened to them. The entity kept on harassing them and trying to gain entry right until the sun came up. Delta said, quote, "I watched the sun slowly rise as the blue sky began to light up, and even in pale sunlight, the creature persisted relentlessly." My mom read all night to me the prayers in that book, and I think I still may remember some. The creature finally stopped attacking the camper, and my mom was relieved for a short while. That is until my brother woke up to the banging 5 minutes before it stopped. After the banging had stopped, he wanted to go outside to get his shoes that he had left outside, even though he had woken up to the banging of some psychopath, perhaps, outside. My mom pleaded with him not to go outside, but you can't keep a teenager from his van shoes, I guess. He miraculously made it back unharmed with his shoes, but he did tell us about some weird footprints outside and claw marks all over the camper. And that's when my mom knew that this thing was no ghost, but some kind of physical manifestation of some creepy poop, if you don't mind my saying. My dad woke up soon after like nothing had happened. He had basically slept through the whole thing. But my mom, on the other hand, she was very brave in my opinion. After my dad woke up, my mom told him all about it, and he was skeptical about it all. After all, my dad didn't even believe in afterlife back then, even though he went to church every Sunday. Everyone went outside to look at the damage, my mom trying to keep me indoors for fear that the creature would come back. It was daylight time now, and the other campers were wondering what the hell was going on as well. We all saw the damage the creature had done. Footprints on the ground of a three-toed beast, claw marks inches thick into the thin camper's walls. My mom urged my dad to get us out of there fast. She wasted no time. Even after seeing evidence of the creature, my brother and my dad denied it and forgot, but that was perhaps the scariest night for my mom and the longest night for me. On our way out of the camping area, police were on their way in and questioning the owners. For what reason? I can only assume it was because of the ruckus that the creature had been making all night long. They should have gotten there sooner, end quote. That's a great point, guys. Why hadn't anyone shown up sooner to investigate? Why did investigators wait until sunrise? Why did other campers wait until sunrise? Could it have been that, like Delta's father and brother, everyone else who was camping near to them was in some sort of paralyzed sleep state that they couldn't and didn't wake up from? I at first thought that they were out there by themselves in the middle of nowhere, but now it seems that they were at an actual campsite where there were plenty of other people around. Why did the entity choose this family out of who knows how many others were out there? It's something we're never going to know, but I wonder if Delta has had any other memories he's stuck down and repressed, as encounters with demonic entities hardly ever happen once, and they do tend to follow the people that they're like harassing. On that same site, there was a similar encounter by a commenter named Aussie Red Dog. Aussie was camping out in the bush of Australia in 2009 when he had his terrifying encounter. He was camping at a place far out in the back of a very small town called Kyogle, which is in northern New South Wales, in the back of Mount Lindsay. Our witness said that he knew the area was a hotbed for Yowie activity, with the Yowie being an Australian version of the North American Bigfoot. While he admitted that it seemed very creepy for reasons he couldn't quite put his finger on, he and his friends didn't really believe in the Yowie or any of the other local legends and lore about that particular spot either. And there were many local legends and a lot of lore about this particular place. He and his friends were experienced and serious bushmen, and so they went into this being very unconcerned with any of that. The campsite itself was off on a very remote logging road with no one else around for several miles in any direction. It was as isolated as it could get and surrounded by the indescribably dense and completely impenetrable forest. The first night they had a great time and eventually decided to play some cards around the campfire. Aussie said that he went off to pee in the woods, and that's when the bizarre events kicked off. As he was relieving himself in the woods, he was suddenly struck with a stench unlike anything he had ever smelled before. The only thing he could compare it to was rotten meat, but it was so strong and overwhelming that he actually started gagging and stumbled backwards without even realizing it. It was like his senses, everything was rejecting this stench, this smell. He also thought he heard a growl coming from the bush, and he turned and made his way back to the campsite as fast as he could without running because he didn't want to alarm his friends. He said of what happened next, quote, "I told the other two, but they said that it might have been some animal, so we went back to our card playing. It was 11:45 by then, and I was dead beat. I had my sleeping bag already unrolled and crawled off after saying goodnight to the other two and slid into the bag. It wasn't long before I passed out. I don't know how long I was asleep, but the three of us were suddenly woken up by the strangest, spookiest, loudest, piercing scream that I have ever heard. It was not human. It was inhuman. We sat up and looked at each other, and when we heard loud crashing coming towards our campsite, like a bulldozer rampaging through the bush, we were scared. Whatever the hell it was big. Then I saw it. Something massive, well built, is coming crashing through the forest. I couldn't make out the details, but it looked strangely like a human, or even better, a gorilla. The smell will haunt me to the end of my days. It was that rotting stench like a corpse. This thing stood over 7 feet as it came tearing through the campsite, then vanished into the night. We all jumped up, gibbering like madmen about what we had just witnessed. Was it just some hippie that just smoked some potent weed? No, can't have been. Too tall and well built to be a hippie. But it smelt like one, though. I tell you this, none of us slept that night. I had the hatchet ready while one of my mates had a huge branch. The other, I didn't know what he had, but we waited until dawn popped its head over the ridge before we left. What we saw in the daylight frightened the Christ out of us. The small saplings were all bent back and snapped. Some of our gear was trampled beyond repair, but we were so shaken and stirred by our experience that we drove into town. We didn't tell the locals about what we saw or heard in case they thought we were nuts. I did find out that a few weeks after we saw that, someone else had the same experience a few miles from where we were. I don't know what we saw, but I'm put off from camping up there," end quote. I just want to start off by saying that this is why I always talk to the locals when I'm in a new place, and I never discount or disregard what they tell me about where I'm going. I wonder if they very obviously encountered a yowie, and even though I don't believe Bigfoot or any of its relatives are aggressive by nature, they will defend their territory, particularly if there are young ones around the area. However, it being as tall as it was and running through the woods as quickly as possible, plus the stench. Now, this person, and I know a lot of you may be like, you know, Gemma, you're making things where there isn't anything, but listen, he said like a rotting corpse, not like rotting meat, which is normally how it's described. So I don't know, but this also opens a case for it being a pale crawler, okay, because it looked like a gorilla, but he's just saying it was like super duper tall. Or was he saying it looked like a gorilla, like how the actual whole shadow was? Because if so, it was a yowie. If not, it was more than likely a pale crawler. And I know a lot of you are going to be like, pale crawlers crawl, Gemma. Yes, but they crawl inhumanly fast at top speeds. In the summer of 1982, a man named Alan Hopewell was camping with some friends in the summertime in their home state of Ohio in the United States. Our witness said everything started off badly, as the first night they were there, a downpour of rain started dumping on them and destroyed their campfire and their plans surrounding it that night. It also got all of their gear wet, as it came on so suddenly that they didn't have time to prepare, and they weren't expecting any inclement weather at that time. He said, quote, "We just sat there with our sleeping gear hanging between trees, hoping to dry it somewhat. We ate what we could, unable to even make coffee. As it was getting on towards dark, we crashed. No real reason to stay up. However, no sooner did it reach full dark when we heard a weird sound coming from downstream, like a cross between a howl and a scream. We each had flashlights, and we produced them only to see them die one after the other. And I changed my batteries in the car on the way down. The others all swore their batteries were new as well. The whatever would crash through the brush to within 20 feet of us, hoot screaming all the way, then turn and run back the other way, then do it again, all the while making that unearthly noise. With no lights and no weapons but a sharp stick, we weren't going away from the campsite to get a better look. We never saw what it was. I don't know when I finally drifted off to sleep, but in the morning the sun was bright, our stuff had sort of dried, and we were ready to pick up the guns at the sheriff's station and get the hell out of there. There was a trail worn back and forth in the grass, but no tracks that we could see. The flashlights, when checked, worked perfectly, end quote. This is interesting because what those men experienced sounds like a typical encounter with an angry and possessive, possibly territorial Bigfoot creature. However, when it comes to the draining of the brand new batteries, that really makes me wonder if somehow ETs were involved here as well. The reason I say that is because I honestly feel like Bigfoot aren't biological beings, but that they're interdimensional and come and go as they please through portals. I wonder if they could do things like make batteries go dead, assuming you watched my video about Bigfoot and infrasound, and understand what that is and kind of how it works. Is it possible that they had a Bigfoot encounter, but that the entity was so angry or overwhelmed that it made sure to cut the lights so the men couldn't see it? I don't know, but I think if it wanted to actually harm them or hurt them, it definitely would have. Think about it. It was able to put them into complete darkness, and while I can't really explain that, I honestly feel like even the rain was a part of whatever this is. I wouldn't be surprised if this man and his friends don't eventually come to realize that they'd been abducted that night. It just makes perfect sense, and I wonder if the infrasound we know and have generally come to accept that Bigfoot creatures emit or know how to use or create could have had something to do with the flashlights dying, or if maybe there was a crossing between entities and we have a Bigfoot and extraterrestrial activity all in one encounter type story. Let me know what you all think in the comments below about this one. This next one, in my opinion, is more paranormal in nature and comes from the commenter named Desire, as she had gone on a camping trip with her elementary school in Singapore. I mean, it struck me as kind of odd, and I wonder if they weren't kind of asking for trouble because they had chosen to set up camp next to a cemetery. They weren't outside in tents or sleeping bags, though, and had stayed in two houses right next to one another that were made of wood, and one held the boys and the other held the girls. There were 2 rows of double bunk beds lining the sides of each wall of the wooden houses or cabins, and after a long night of having fun, they all separated and went to their respective bunks in the cabin that Desire was sleeping in. They all laid down and everything had been normal up until that point. After they all got comfortable, however, things turned terrifying and not normal at all very fast. Our witness explained, quote, "I suddenly woke up and I don't really know why exactly. It was around 2 a.m. I could hear someone making this panic noise, like someone was scared, making these tiny scream noises on the other side in front, the other row of bunk beds. So I got up and crawled to the end of my bed to check out what it was. It was dark, but I could still see in the dark. My heart was beating faster and faster at this point. I looked around to see where the noise was, and there it was. A girl from the other class was at the bottom of the bunk bed. She was panicking so much and tried to wake her sleeping friend next to her. Her bed was right next to the huge doors, and so I was wondering what she was so scared of until I looked at what was right next to her. It was this woman with long white hair, white dirty skin, white dress, and she had an eye on her forehead. The woman was just staring at the girl and pointing at her with long nails. Her nails seemed rotten. I just froze. I got so scared and my heart was beating so fast that I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I didn't dare to move because every time I move, the bed makes noises. The bunk beds are pretty old. I was afraid that the woman would turn to me if she heard the noise, so I silently watched as the woman reached her finger closer and closer to the girl. Her friend wouldn't wake up, so she quickly jumped over to her friend's side of the bed and hid under the blanket. The woman was still there, though, but I also wanted to hide under my blanket, and so I did as fast and quietly as I could. I didn't even breathe. I was dead quiet. But eventually, I drifted off to sleep. Nothing happened after that, end quote. So, this encounter was really terrifying, but I definitely had some questions afterwards. After I read through it and found that this wasn't the end of what happened to them that night, there's more. Most of the questions, though, weren't answered, like did her friend say anything to her about it the next day, as she more than likely knew she was watching and awake because she literally saw her but was too afraid to say anything. So why didn't the girl who saw all of this and the girl who was kind of the victim of the white-haired woman discuss it at all? And did they? You know, I don't know. If they did, what was said? So I do have another quote from the same witness about what happened the next night. Quote, "On the second night, scary things were happening again. It was around 9 p.m. when we had a tiny concert in an outside hall. Then soon it got to 10 p.m. My friends and I needed to tinkle, so we went to the outside toilets that were far away on the other side near the cemetery. There were 3 of us. We went into the female's bathroom and it was pitch black in there. There were 3 bathroom stalls. The lights did not work and we got creeped out, especially me. We really needed to pee, so one was holding the door open so that the light could get in, one to go pee, and one to just stand there, which was me, and wait for my friends to finish peeing. So then when she finished, my other friend went and did her business and I had to hold the door, and it was finally my turn to pee. Gosh, I was so relieved that it was finally my turn. And while I was peeing, my friends that were holding the door open yelled my name to hurry and finish up because they saw this ghost with long black hair on the ceiling where the last stall was. They told me something was there, and then I panicked and pulled my pants up and opened the toilet stall door. And by the time my friends saw me coming out, they had just run off. I didn't even dare to look at what was on the ceiling. The door almost closed on me, and I quickly opened it as fast as I could and ran like hell. I caught up to my friends who were still running. Like, how could they just run and leave me? Gosh. While we were running, we heard loud running footsteps behind us, which seemed like it was coming faster and faster after us. We did not want to look back. We just kept on running. All of us screamed like hell and kept on running and running. I panicked so much, I didn't know what to do other than to continue running. The footsteps were still there behind us, and by the time we finally reached the hall where everyone else was, we turned around and found nothing. The footsteps were also gone. It was so loud, though. Our hearts were beating like there was no tomorrow. It was then 12 a.m., and everyone went to get ready for bed. This time, I was sleeping on the bottom of the bunk bed. Everyone went off to sleep, and so did I. The bunk beds on my side were where the windows are right behind us. The windows aren't like normal windows. I don't know how to describe them, but it's really easy to hear in from the outside. So then, once again, I suddenly woke up. This time, it was nearly 4 a.m. I then started to think of what happened and got scared. I could hear something from behind, which was outside of the window. I didn't really know what it was until it got louder and louder. Yes, the footsteps again. This time it sounded like someone was walking really slow. It was even creepier than the previous one. I tried waking my friend by shaking her really hard, who was sleeping next to me, but she too wouldn't wake up. I still heard the footsteps and my heart was beating really fast. I quickly climbed up to my other friend and hid under her blanket. She was still sleeping though. She thought I was a pillow, so she put her leg and her hand over me. I felt safer, LOL, and so I fell asleep. It was 8 a.m. when I and everyone else woke up. We panicked and left. I will never return to that place ever again. End quote. The entity in the bathroom sounds like a creeper, and they are known to be in old, abandoned, and neglected places, like certain kinds of cemeteries and places like allegedly haunted asylums and hospitals, places like that. Hopefully, they've learned their lesson and won't camp so close to graveyards anymore. But I wonder how many other encounters were had at this place, because it isn't really our witnesses' fault, because they didn't build the cabins there, and more than likely it was just that they wanted the opportunity to go on a field trip and didn't have any say in where they went. Very creepy. That's actually not the only encounter from Singapore, and commenter Anakin Lee said she was out camping on Pulau Ubin Beach with some friends when they had their own scary and strange experience. Our witness said, quote, "When we reached there, it was almost evening. We quickly built a tent under a huge coconut tree. Then we started to build a fire. We had a hard time starting the fire because we could not find many sticks there. By the time we started the fire, the sun had set. All types of animals were lurking in the darkness. Then we saw 5 boats sailing toward us. When they reached the shore, we could see that they were not human, but ghosts. They were almost all transparent, arms with long rifles with a bayonet stuck at the tips. When we saw this, we quickly hid in the tent. There were about 20 of them, and they were dressed like Japanese soldiers in the movies. Then they came across our tents, mumbled some language that we could not understand, and walked past. In a few minutes, we heard villagers screaming for help like they were being killed. Then we could hear planes zooming above us, and next came an explosion. After a few minutes, it became silent. We could only hear the waves rushing up to the shore. We then took a look at the environment, and it was normal. No smoke or anything. We quickly packed our stuff and went back home. The next day, we met in the National Library where we did research on Pulau Ubin and found out that in the past, the Japanese had invaded Pulau Ubin and killed many innocent villagers. So what we saw in Pulau Ubin was just spirits roaming around, end quote. Well, this one seems a little bit out there even for me, but then again, I think about residual hauntings and wonder if either that's what this group was dealing with, or if perhaps they had just somehow crossed into an alternate dimension where all of that was just happening in real time and our witnesses only perceived them as ghostly and spirits because they were the ones intruding on that world's dimension. Does that make sense? Just a few thoughts of mine, and of course we'll probably never know exactly what this was or why it happened to them, particularly in the first place. Let's go over to Malaysia and the witness named Anis Farmin, who was also camping with a group of kids on a school trip, and she was 11 years old at the time. She attended a so-called Chinese school in Johor, Malaysia, and the event consisted of 229 male and female students participating in the camping trip for 2 days and 1 overnight. The first afternoon was great and they had fun at a barbecue, but our witness said things got very scary very quickly, as they do. Our witness said, quote, "That night had been a Malam Jumat, which means Thursday night. It is usually believed by Malaysians that ghosts are extremely active and love to wander and disturb people the most on Thursday nights, more than any other normal night." That's actually true. I remember making howling sounds out of nowhere just to remind my friends that it was Thursday night. It was all fun and laughs, that is, until Amira, one of my 6 best friends, screamed suddenly and said that there were red eyes looking at us in front of the storeroom bell tower on top of the office building. Not only had she seen it, but also a few of the other Chinese students had spotted it as well, although when she screamed at us to look, there wasn't anything there. That was when all of us students felt a chill run down our spines. The teacher didn't notice our silent panicking at all. All of us students were silently panicking, having that gut feeling that something was wrong. Behind us was the block containing the standard 6 students' classrooms. It was the darkest building there at the moment. Some of us turned completely, some stood up and walked closer to the buildings to get a closer look. Others were only sending glances, either wishing to catch a glance of something or nothing at all, but just doing it to appear brave. I was one of the ones to move closer to the building to get a closer look, yet alas, I found nothing. Instead, when I looked at the block building, which contained our classrooms and the 3rd standard students' classrooms, and looked at the 4th floor's 5th classroom at the ending of the hallway on the left besides the girls' toilet, I saw a woman with messy long black hair covering her face, wearing a long white dress, which was blood-stained, and she was looking directly at all of us students. The scariest part about it was that was my classroom. I stood shocked at the sight. Some people ran away towards the tent in the arena. Some people started screaming and crying. Some people ran to the toilet out of fright with friends. My group and a few other friends were still there at the barbecue area. The teachers told us to just continue eating at the camping area, which is the big assembly hall for the girls and the small assembly hall for the boys. That was a night I could never ever forget. We all saw that woman and certainly scared all of us. But luckily it didn't disturb any of us at all other than that scene that night. After that, there were rumors that started circling the school saying that the ground the school was built on a graveyard. Then it became a mental hospital before becoming our school, end quote. This one was a bit confusing for me because I wondered how the teachers hadn't noticed the students' silent suffering, as the quote said, when our witness also said the sentence before that there had just been other students screaming about seeing red eyes. This is just another tale of people being in very haunted places at nighttime and not knowing what it is that they're dealing with. To me, the woman they saw is more than likely an earthbound spirit, and as for the red eyes, they could have been anything. Literally. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that school hadn't once been a hospital or a psychiatric unit, something where there was a lot of death and suffering before it became the school, but because I don't have exact details as to which school it was specifically or anything like that, I can't say it with any surety or certainty. In case it had been a graveyard, let me say this, a pro tip directly from me to you. Stop camping in, near, and around graveyards. Moving on. Commenter Majarlika012 is from the Philippines, and in 2008 she went with some friends and other people to a place called Jamboree site at Mount Makiling, and her story includes some sort of possession or something like that. Everyone had a great time all day and participated in many different activities. The nighttime would bring a whole different vibe to the place and to the general atmosphere, though, and our witness said about it all, quote, "If I remember it right, it was around 8 p.m. and my group was engrossed in cooking since we were all hungry. We didn't really care what was happening all around us. After we had eaten our meal, we heard our professor announcing through a megaphone that we had to pack our things because the first bus would be arriving at 4 a.m. And for those who want to be fetched by their family, they may do so. We were supposed to stay in that campsite for 3 days, and with that announcement, we were shocked and wondered what in the world had happened. Why this sudden departure? So what I did was I went to my classmates from another tent and I asked them. And I was really intrigued because they said that there were 3 girls being possessed at the main function hall. I would want to see that for myself, but our professors didn't want anyone near the hall, and those who were staying inside the hall couldn't leave. I didn't know the exact story, but here's what I gathered. When we were doing the land activity, I forgot which that was, these girls saw a kid and they were amazed because the kid had known their names. They played with the kid, and at night they were possessed. The residents in that camp said that this kid is an elemental entity who likes to play with visitors, and it was not the first time that possession of the campers occurred. They said that in order for the entity to move out of the body of the possessed, we need to offer a white chicken. So our professors went to work doing their best to look for a white chicken. I called home and asked my father to fetch me and told him what happened. So by 6 a.m. the following day, my father had fetched me. Since he had brought a van, some of my classmates hitched with us because we learned that one of the possessed girls said that bus numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 will meet in accident, and we were from bus number 7. I don't know what happened next when we left the campsite. Come Monday, we're having our class. A student government officer called our professor informing him of an emergency. He said that one of the possessed girls from the camp was acting weird. She was reaching someone by the window as if asking her to come and jump off. By the way, we were on the 5th floor, so there was panic and all. After that incident, the girl skipped class for I think a week. It said that she was brought to a faith healer. When we saw her the following week, I asked her if she still remembered what had happened. She said that she only recalled a guy from the campsite calling to her. She did not remember being possessed, and during the Monday at school, she saw that guy again telling her to come closer. She did not notice the guy in the window, and she might fall from the 5th floor of the building if she did go to him, end quote. So one of the most frustrating things about this encounter is the witness never goes on to say whether any of those buses had any issues. Okay, so I definitely believe in elemental entities that take on the form of human beings to lure actual human beings to their deaths, but this seems like more than that to me, possibly even being something demonic, because it followed at least one of the girls. I haven't known many cases where an elemental actually follows the person, and they're also usually a lot quicker in finishing the job they set out to do than most other entities that possess to do harm. I wonder too, guys, if the adults who were setting this trip up knew that something like this had already happened to other kids on more than one occasion. Why in the world would they even go there and bring kids with them in the first place? It sounded completely irresponsible, but that's how people behave when they don't believe. And that struck me as odd too, because the adults immediately, or so it seems, recognized the possession for what it was, which means they believed enough to shut down the entire trip and disturb parents in the middle of the night. I don't know. This one didn't make much sense. I definitely believed it, but it was really creepy, right? But I think there's so much more information the person could have put in. From Ranker comes an encounter from user Careless Wispy, who had their experience while camping in the United States in southern Illinois. He had been with his girlfriend, his sister, and 2 friends who were dating each other. It started innocently enough, as it usually does, with a hike, but ended with a bizarre tale. Our witness said, quote, "So we followed this short trail out to a very secluded pond that almost nobody knows about. We were sitting on the edge of the lake, smoking and enjoying the view, when me and the other guy started to feel like we were being watched/uneasy, and we generally have good instincts when it comes to things like that. We know when to GTFO, which is get the F word out, but our girlfriends and my sister said we were just being paranoid. Then it got cold. Fast. It was January, but the night we went, it was 60 degrees outside. It dropped to probably 40 degrees within 10 minutes, and there was this weird feeling in the air that was almost tangible. Everyone felt cold out inside and out, and there was, for the lack of a better word, a vibe of intense hatred around us. At this point, the girls were freaking out, and we hauled out, all the while feeling eyes on us. Fast forward a month, it was a full moon and the perfect time for a night hike. The other couple wouldn't go, so my girlfriend and I went alone. We were sitting on the edge of the pond again, and she had her head on my shoulder. All of a sudden, I had an overwhelming sense of dread emanating from behind me, like there was a presence there I couldn't see, and I couldn't bring myself to turn around. I was so effing frightened. I looked down at my girlfriend and saw her face was cinched up like how she does when she's afraid, and I'm about to ask her if she feels it too, but as I'm about to speak, I hear a woman's voice in my ear. She says something that I completely understood, but cannot say out loud because it's the darkest, most horrible part of me in a language that I knew isn't of this world. I'm staring at my girlfriend's face, hoping it's her, but it wasn't, and it was in the opposite ear. I started trembling and said to my girlfriend, "Remember everything you think and feel in this moment." She asked why, and I told her to just do it, and we would discuss it back at the house. After a few minutes, the presence was totally gone, and we started running/walking back. As we were doing so, we both felt watched, and we both heard branches cracking and odd noises in the woods. We got back, and I asked my girlfriend how she felt when I told her to remember, and she said she had felt really sad, really cold, and very alone, like she wanted to die, and like we were being watched. I agreed, but was thankful she hadn't heard the woman talking like I had. So I tried to convince myself we were just paranoid. My girlfriend and I agreed to never go back there again, end quote. This is fairly annoying because he never tells what the entity had actually said to him, but it was probably something to do with harming his girlfriend or harming his family in some way or something like that. But that's only speculation because he doesn't even give a hint. However, that wasn't the end of his story. So let's see what he had to say about what happened a month later when he decided to go back to the pond and investigate on his own. He would later regret that decision entirely, and here's what he said happened. Quote, "So fast forward another month and I have a day off and nowhere to go till my girlfriend gets out of class. She has moved out of the house with the couple I mentioned earlier, and I have at that point tried to convince myself that we are all just paranoid and there was no way that all of this happened, but I couldn't. So I, being the curious guy I am, went to the pond alone in the middle of the day. I sat on a different part and had no trouble. So I started walking along the edge toward the spot where everything had occurred, and as I got closer, I heard someone following me in the trees, but I couldn't see it. I sat down and I was scanning the trees on the opposite bank when I got the feeling again. Temperatures dropped by 20 degrees and cold terror filled me. I'm just looking down because I'm paralyzed with terror. It was like a dream. I slowly looked up just a little bit and saw the reflection of a woman dressed in black rags 6 feet away from me in the pond, but no woman. As I see that god-awful apparition, I hear a blood-curdling scream from the woods behind me, and I whip around. When I looked back at the pond, the woman was gone. I knew I had to get the F out, but that meant going through those horrible woods. I took off running and started hearing breathing, cackling, and footsteps behind me, and as it got to where I felt as if it was right on top of me, I whipped out my knife and turned around, but there was nothing there, nothing but cold malice in the air, and again she spoke to me, different words this time, but that same language. I took off, jumped in my car, and sped off. I will never go back to that place because the worst thing is the woman I saw is the same woman I have seen since I was in 3rd grade, and I started getting a recurring nightmare 3 to 4 times a year. Also a very effed up story. For a little background info, my sister is an atheist and doesn't believe in paranormal things. My girlfriend and the other couple are spiritual, but until this didn't put too much stock in ghosts or other supernatural things, and my beliefs are my own. None of us know how to explain what happened, and all go camping, hiking, exploring all the time. This was not a random chance or animal. This was something else. I know not many people will believe me, but there has been zero embellishment to this story, end quote. That's another thing. Like, he talks about their beliefs very openly. Like, let me tell you about everyone else's beliefs, but he keeps his own beliefs to himself. I don't know. I believe this story, but there's something off-putting or just off about the person who wrote it. If this is true and our witness had been seeing the same apparition or entity since he was very small, then this would be very concerning, and I would love to know how he's doing today. Entities that are lower vibrational or demonic in nature are usually the ones that follow people around, just waiting for the perfect moment to strike and either possess them, get them to do something terrible to themselves or others, worse, or both. Your spirit team and all the entities that consists of follow you around from in the womb, but it isn't the same thing, and they would never continue doing anything that they see instills fear or terror into you like this. Also, if this is the same apparition he had been seeing since he was very little, you can assume or presume one of two things. One, he had been kind of forewarned about this night, that he would go out there and meet this entity, but nothing too crazy. I mean, nobody got hurt, and he was still willing to go back, happened. So then, with that being said, I'd have to presume or assume that it was an entity that's attached to him. And if you're listening, you better get that taken care of. From the same site, we have the witness, The Trees Grow, who had a strange encounter while camping with a friend while in a field near their housing estate. He explained the events, and it's another one I don't have a definitive explanation for, but that I have some ideas about. He said, quote, "At around 3 a.m., I heard the distinct sound of grass and vegetation as someone walked on in outside our tent. I was stunned with terror, for one, because this was a private field owned by a farmer who would probably be angry to find us there, but more so because I hadn't heard anyone approaching. Just suddenly there was someone right outside of the tent. I held my breath out of fear and shock, which is when I heard another set of footsteps belonging to a dog, by the sound of it, out there. Filled with dread, I just lay as still as possible, breathing slowly and quietly, listening to this person and his dog walking back and forth outside the tent. I thought we were going to get shot or beaten by this farmer dude. Then I saw the guy's shadow, which freaked me out a hell of a lot more than I already was. It was huge and looming over us every time he passed our tent, and I couldn't see the dog's shadow even though I heard it making increasingly erratic circulations of the tent. This carried on for around 5 minutes, and although it felt like much more time had passed, the shadows disappeared and the sounds faded away. They didn't leave or anything. It was more like they were still walking outside of the tent, but with perpetually lighter footing. When I was sure that the sounds had ceased and there was no threat waiting for me outside, I freaked out at my friends, still as quietly as possible, and said we had to go because someone knew we were here and we could get in a lot of trouble with the owner or possibly the law. I told them everything that had happened, and they didn't believe me, thinking I had been asleep as well and dreamt the whole thing. I assured them I hadn't and that we had to go right now. They tried to get back to sleep, ignoring me completely because they're lazy as hell and didn't want to pack everything up and go right then. I gave up too, even though I knew that I'd never get to sleep. 10 minutes later, the sounds returned, just like the volume outside had been turned up gradually. I felt the same dread I had felt before and whispered one of my friends' names so that they would wake up and hear it. "Shh," one of them said. They had already heard it and told me to open the tent to see who was terrorizing us. I did so slowly, easing my hand out of the sleeping bag and up to the zipper. It probably took 5 minutes for me to reach it, just so I was sure not to make a sound, and I pulled it down so violently I nearly ripped the whole thing in half. There was nobody there. We got out within the space of 5 seconds, and there was nobody anywhere. As I mentioned, we were at the top of a hill in the middle of a field, and so we could see if anyone had decided to run, but there was nothing. Even though it was impossible for anyone to escape my seeing them, I am absolutely positive there were footsteps outside of our tent that night." End quote. I wonder if this entity was some sort of cryptid, like a dog man or something like that, and if in fact the person they thought they had heard and the animal as well were one and the same entity. What do you guys think about this one, and what do you all think this could have been? If it had been the owner or the farmer that didn't want anyone trespassing, surely he would have confronted them, right? Was this someone else trespassing? I don't know. He didn't describe the shadow except to say it didn't look human, I think he said. I don't know. Very strange. Last, but definitely not least, we have an encounter story from the Reddit user AsReal337 from when he went one summer with the Boy Scouts group he had been a part of at the time, camping. The group was camping near the Antietam National Battlefield in Maryland, United States, and for those of you who don't know, this place is said to have been the site of one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War. The trip was for the weekend and was meant to be nothing more than an educational and fun time for the kids in the troop. It took a very sharp turn into the bizarre, however, and he said about it, quote, "A number of the other troops had also come down for the weekend, and we had a weekend full of Civil War education, reenactment, and troops pranking other troops. All of the troops were camped along Antietam, and I believe I said that wrong earlier, Creek on the other side of the Burnsides Bridge Road, the side that isn't part of the park. It was pretty easy for anyone to cross the field and walk onto the battlefield to go up to Burnsides Bridge along the creek and see the field where the Union soldiers massed and tried to cross the bridge. I grew up outside of Gettysburg, so ghost stories about Antietam didn't bother me at all. There's enough weird tales in Gettysburg that other battlefields really don't faze me. The second night we were there, the troops all hit the hay early due to the fact they were made to march all day by an overzealous reenactor. I took a walk over to the bridge right after dinner, and the sun was slowly sinking towards night. It was actually quite beautiful seeing the field and the creek. I walked up to the bridge and started to walk across it when I felt an excruciatingly sharp pain in my chest. I almost doubled over in pain and clenched my chest. I thought maybe I was having a heart attack, but both of my arms were fine and free to move. I put both hands on the part of my chest that hurt and felt another sharp pain right below the top of my right shoulder, in the meaty part above your pecs, underneath your shoulder, and just in front of your underarm. That pain came and knocked me down where I almost cracked my head open on the side of the stone bridge. I laid there freaking out and scrambled to my feet and looked back at the camp. I got back to camp and had the other scoutmaster take a look at my chest, and I have 2 raised red lumps that under the skin you could see were turning into blood blisters. He asked me what I was doing, and I told him that it just happened when I was walking around the battlefield. Not once had I thought about a haunting or anything like it. I called it an evening and turned in. The next morning after breakfast, the troops were scheduled to meet with a park official at Burnside's bridge. Our troop and about 4 other ones stood on the battlefield facing towards the bridge where the park official was detailing the history of a certain battle. When he talked about the bridge, I paid more attention. I found out that the Confederate sharpshooters took up positions on either side of the creek, and on the side where we were all at was the Union. The Union soldiers were supposed to take the bridge and were just picked off left and right on the bridge. Confederates lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 soldiers, and the Union lost over 15,000. No Union soldier ever made it past the halfway point of that bridge. At this point, my scoutmaster just looked at me, and I was wondering what the hell happened the night before. TLDR, went to Antietam and felt ghost bullets shoot me, end quote. So this is very typical of places like Gettysburg and other battlefields in the United States and all over the world, where someone accidentally steps into the residual energy to a degree where they take on what happened to a particular spirit that's lingering nearby. Sometimes this is done by accident, and sometimes the spirit sees something in the person and gifts them with the experience. I'm not surprised that this happened in this area, and Gettysburg is actually on my bucket list for this reason, for all of the alleged paranormal activity on the battlefields and all around there. Also, and it happens only very rarely, someone who was involved in the wars or who had fought on a specific battlefield in another incarnation suddenly finds themselves back at the spot where they were either terribly injured or died, and it's a shock to their soul, and they end up reliving their own deaths. I've seen this a lot with men who visit the Colosseum in Rome, believe it or not. Let me know your guys' thoughts on all of these, or if one in particular stuck out to you. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content. If you enjoyed spending this time with me, spread the love by sharing this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure your notification bells are turned and switched on. In the description box, you will find important links, ways to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, my Amazon wish list gift link, become a member, become a patron. Also, my newest book, Gone Mysterious Disappearances Volume 3, plus Gone 1 and 2, and all of my other books. The links for all of my books, Kindle and paperback and Audible on Amazon, will be in the description box. Don't forget, with this newest book that is out, by the time you guys see this, it will have been out for about a week. Once you get the book, please rate it 5 stars, give it a great glowing review, because you can buy as many books as you want, and like, yes, that helps with my profit, but if you don't rate and review the books, then they don't get pushed out by Amazon. It doesn't really go by sales only, it goes by ranks and reviews as well. So please, if you can do that for me. If you want an autographed copy of any of my book or several books, please email me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com to send in your own encounters with the paranormal, supernatural, extraterrestrial, or otherworldly. Send those in, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Don't forget, on Friday nights, my live stream, Live Intuitive Oracle, from 7:15ish p.m. Eastern Time to like 10:30 or 11. I pull one random card for everyone who comes in. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please let me know. Also, the tentative schedule until I'm back to full-time work on September 3rd is also in the description box, as well as, I believe, rates for all of my readings and for some of the things that I sell outside of my channel. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, you're amazing. You're not less than. You are totally worth all of the work you have to put into your goals and your dreams, because abundance is your birthright, right? All you have to do is manifest it and expect it as though you expect the mail to come every day. I believe in you. I got your back, and don't let anyone ever make you feel less than your goals and your dreams. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time.